another extra episode of Aranda Talks. For the next 5 weeks, I will make each week an extra episode with the recaps of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Spoiler alert. If you don't want to know what is in the episode or about Strange New World, please listen to this episode after you have watched the episode. I will post this episode on Wednesday, just before the next episode will appear on the streaming services. This to avoid spoilers. On Vulcan, Spock arrives at the ritual site of his family for the Kun Ut Kalifi, where his betrothed T'Pring and a number of other Vulcans await. He takes the mallet and strikes the ritual gong, and the bell ringers begin the ringing. The mistress of ceremonies beckons T'Pring forward. But as Spock approaches, T'Pring notices his ears. Spock now appears fully human, with rounded ears, and is wearing his Starfleet uniform. T'Pring declares she will not marry a human and is evoked to Kalafi, a ritual duel to the death. As 2 weapons bearers come forward, carrying Libras, Spock asks who he will be fighting. T'Pring points to another Vulcan in the crowd. It is Spock again, with fully Vulcan features. The human-appearing Spock protests that fighting oneself was illogical, but quickly takes up the Libra as his Vulcan self slashes at him with it. The Vulcan Spock quickly disarms his human self, as Nuranya asks what he would know of logic. He was only human, ruled by emotion. The human Spock looks fearful as the Vulcan Spock raised his Libra for the killing blow. Just as Spock awakens, he is in his quarter aboard the USS Enterprise and he is alone. He goes to the mirror near his bed to confirm that his ears are still pointed, and feels them for himself just to be sure. Science Officer Log Stardate 2341.4. After our harrowing encounter with the Gorn, Enterprise has returned to Starbase 1, one of the oldest, most venerated space stations in the Federation, newly repaired after the Klingon War. Here, the crew will abjuring for some much-needed rest and relaxation, while I have agreed to assist the captain with a diplomatic matter. I plan to spend most of the time here with my fiancée T'Pring, who has arranged to join me since our last visit was cut short by... In the midst of the log entry, Spock is interrupted by the chime at his door. It is T'Pring, who greets him in the formal manner. Parted from me, but never parted. Never and always touching and touched. Meeting at the appointed place. Spock gives the formal answer, before kissing her. I thought Vulcans were cold-blooded and never would do that, but okay, in a way. T'Pring cast a critical eye around the room, saying that it looked very human, and she found it hard to believe a Vulcan had slept there. Spock replies that there were his quarter and he was in the process of redecorating. What makes me laugh, because that's quite human humor for him. She withdrew her criticism until his redecorating is complete, and thanked him for arranging accommodation for the colleagues Cattell. Spock hopes she finds them accurate, before asking T'Pring about her presence there. T'Pring asks if he knows about her professional responsibilities, and Spock recalls that she was rehabilitating people for their crimes by showing them the true path of Vulcan logic. T'Pring explains that once such person bargained to ore has been reported in the area. Spock recalls that he had been responsible for the uprising on Kepler-22b. The Vulcan authorities had sought him for some time. Spock thinks that T'Pring has some work ahead of her, but she replies that this was the reason Cattell accompanied her. She reminds him that the last time they were together it had been his duty that interrupted him, and believed volatilize their relationship. Spock agrees, but adds that he had some responsibilities to deal with beforehand. T'Pring, somewhat cold now, answered that she expected nothing less. He thinks her disappointed, but she said she is realistic. He assures her he will be free to dine with her that night. In the conference room, Captain Pike, Spock, and Cadet Uhura are being briefed by Admiral April, who shows a map display highlighting the Rogovian Protectorate, a small but vitally important piece of territory between the Klingon Empire and the Romulan Star Empire. It's the fastest route to the other side of the Beta Quadrant, but without a safe passage, the Federation keep losing ships there. Pike asks why there have been no inroads made with them before, and April replies that they have been unusually private up to that point. That changed after a diplomatic overture by the Tellarites. Pike, with a somewhat knowing look, asks how that went. The Admiral looks mildly amused as he brings up the footage of Rovolians getting into Tellarite Ambassador Corral's face, saying that his beard was as ridiculous as his proposals, and that every word was an insult to Rogovia. Whoa, and here I thought the Tellarans were rude, Pike observes. April muses that Corral said the wrong things, but they didn't have time to speculate. The Rogovians had opened negotiation with the Klingon, and the Romulans were not far behind. Time was not on their side. Pike is confident that they can handle negotiation with more grace than the Tellarites, which is good. April notes, because they were meeting with the Rogovians delegation for the following day, the Rogovians' flagship which was docked to the station. Uhura recognized the ship as a solar sail ship, which April explained was brought out for ceremonial occasions. Whenever the Rogovians sign the treaty, they fly their new allies' flag in tribute. Further discussion is interrupted by La'an, who reports a problem. The Rogovians delegation has arrived already and are demanding to speak to Pike immediately. Pike has her shown them in, and their spokesmen begin by saying they are been sitting and waiting on the ship while the Federation officers discuss the upcoming negotiations. April recognized him as Captain Faso. When the Admiral identifies himself, Faso bluntly states he will only speak to Captain Pike. The captain identifies himself and tries to break the tension by saying if he had known the delegations were coming early, he would have cooked them up an Earth specialty. Faso laughs and appears glad to meet the captain. Formally identifying himself as his first officer Brax, Pike introduces Spock, Uhura, La'an, and the latter of whom leaves to attend to the security thing. Brax sees Spock as a Vulcan, famous for logic and believes he had a voice in the Federation government. Spock replies that all Federation members have a voice in its governments, something the Rongovians find confusing, to which an amused Pike agrees. When Vassal asks how they determine who is in control, Pike explained that it is determined by voting, an effort to listen to all their members' voices. The Volgovians, too, are listeners. Sympathy is a strong part of their society, something few people understand. Clapping Pike on the shoulder, Vassal chooses to get started with the negotiation. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Ortegas and Nurse Chapel arrive in sickbay, looking for Dr. Mbenga, telling him that they were ready to go for shore leave. While they are in casual clothes, the doctor is still in uniform, surprised that it was time already. He has been collecting data to share with his colleague Dr. Baroa, an expert in non-invasive surgical techniques, who has come all the way from the other side of the quarrel to meet him. Meanwhile, Ortegas asks about Lieutenant Dever, whom Chappelle has been involved with, asking if she should keep a communicator over or rely on a hand signal. Chappelle replies there was no need. The thing she liked about Dever was how they were on the same page. The casual, no attachment, this is just for fun. Zero commitments, page, as she puts it. Ortegas notes this was more of a book than a page and reminds Teppo that she had said the same thing about a woman on Arias Tree. Something Chappelle calls a misunderstanding, and it was only one time. Ortegas corrects it to be one very entertainment time, to which Chappell asks how being changed by life phase of fire could be fun. Mbenga steps out, fully packed and still in uniform, but with a head adorned with fishing lures. Mbenga plans to go fly fishing, having heard the biosphere on the starbase had everything. In the transporter room, Una and La'an are supervising the departure crew. Ortegas tells La'an she didn't have to check them out in one person, but La'an believes it was the only way to make sure it was done right, before remarking on Mbenga's nice hat. Mbenga sighs and takes it off, before asking what La'an and Una had planned for a short leave. Ortegas jokingly answered that they don't do short leave, they sure stay. Mbenga begins to chuckle about the nickname, but backtracks when he sees both Ortega and Chabo negatively shaking their heads, saying he didn't know what he was saying, and asks Chief Cal to energize. Una pointed to ask about the nickname, but when the doctor hems and have Ortegas admits that the yeomen often called Una where fun goes to die, she tries to pass it off with a joke, saying it if they knew any better, they wouldn't be yeomen. Una briskly orders Cal to energize. After he does so, she asks if he has heard this, as he specially denies it. A glance at La'an only earns a shake of the head. Spock returns to his quarters, apologizing to T'Pring about the unexpected start of the negotiation. While she does not doubt his duty importance, she reminds him they had agreed that this time would be for them, and that she had set aside important work of her own to they could meet. She believes that mutual sacrifice was crucial to a successful relationship, and Spock agrees it when indisputable. She worries that his Starfleet services makes him behave like a human, and would make them incompatible. She tells him that perhaps he should prepare for his important work, and brusquely leaves. Spock looks over to see the meal she prepared and bows his head. Well, guys, today my good friend Mark Seven is joining us again for this lovely recap of Spock Amok. And so, welcome, Mark, again.
I'm very happy to be here again and always happy to talk about the things we love, like Star Trek.
Yeah, well, this was an interesting episode. What do you think about it in general?
Well, in general, it was very, very funny. I laughed a lot. I learned serious things about Star Trek, and I am very, I am even thinking about to start my own bingo in my fan club in Brazil. So that
Enterprise
will be
Bingo!
that will at least will be funny.
Oh, that was just a funny moment about when
Yes.
they transported the people over to Starbase One for shore leave, and
Hmm.
Una and Laan were checking them out, and they said, "Well, Una had this nickname," and
Hmm.
it was so funny how she reacted, and also, and that was a good one. I laughed about that when Una and Laan were interrogating those two junior officers, and they played
Yeah.
good cop, bad cop. Oh, I laughed my ass off. Oh my god, that was so funny.
The cadets and the new ones are always fun to the older officers. And if you remember that um, about Una, if you remember the very first episode, the chase, you see Pike talking with Una in a way. Well, you are cold as a computer. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And at that episode, you could see her kind of offended about that. But now we can see that more explained. You know,
Mm, mm.
she is really cold. She is really objective. She is really too much concentrated in her job. So people even call there where fun goes to die. So
Yeah, and
it has some logic about that. I like this connection to the past.
yeah, and that's also with Laan, and I couldn't connect with her because of her coldness and how she reacted and how she was. And in this episode, you saw that she was trying to be more open and more, yeah, just kind of loosen up. And there was a moment that they were talking about, yeah, why is everyone thinking that we can't make fun? And they did those weird things to having fun. And
it it was more to understand why the lower decks are having fun with those things. What is the magic that make so many of them bet on this procedure to make that so under official and so obligatory? They needed to understand that. They needed some empathy. You know,
mm,
this is the very key of this episode.
yeah, I really like this episode. They wrote it very well, and it's also, of course, about the lessons, but also in the relationship. One of the relationship, what I really like, is that between Spock and Nurse Chapel,
Mm-hmm.
and the fun moment was in this episode when she sat down with him and she gave him some relationship advice, and there
Mm-hmm.
was that moment that she was smack him, and I was thinking, okay, very
so
recognizable.
So you see, there are many kinds of empathy. There is the empathy of the true friend and real friend. There is the empathy of a couple like Spock and Spring. We both know that that relationship have no future, but they are giving us a time between the discovery and the TOS when a mock time also happens. So it happens this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but everything went normally, right? But 7 years from now, it will happen again, and that we saw in TOS. So, so this problem and solving of the problem proceeds in this episode. You see empathy. You see the capability of see things through other eyes, to your friend's eyes, to your wife's eyes, through your uh, to your commanded officers' eyes too. You see, even the people that were asking to become part of Star Trek, they are masters on that and see things through other eyes. They became Telarit for the Telarites. They became human for the humans, Vulcan to the Vulcan, and Pike got that.
Yeah.
And that's what the real secret of the episode. You can not only have empathy for someone, but you can understand all the empathy of the other person. That was the master click of the episode. You can be above that. Um, you can learn more with empathy than 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 with empathy itself.
So when we are looking at the beginning of this episode, we saw that
Mm.
Spock had a nightmare. And we saw him
Yes.
on Vulcan with his family, and he suddenly changed into a human. That
Hmm.
is also one of our first meetings in the rituals, how they are on Vulcan. But
Hmm.
it's confusing me in how all about now the relationship what Vulcans have with each other and like in a romantic relationship. And the first thought I had of this scene was Ponfar, it was in the 7 years. What the hell?
Well, live a life having Ponfar each 7 years, you understand that. Thank God I have Ponfar even 7 minutes, so I don't care. Well, what Spock was living in that dream. They was living and illustrating in his mind his own conflict. He is half human. He is half Vulcan. So how can he deal with that? Because he was forced to be completely Vulcan all the time and never could do that. And now he's fulfilling that by getting married to get someone else with a wife in there, and so go on, and so it goes on. So that conflict can manifest itself in a nightmare because he's always worried about that.
Hmm. And I think that's what you also see in uh, Quentin Zacharias and Leonard Nimoy's Spock.
Mm.
It's always been there.
Yes.
And I remember, and that's what I don't like the J.J. Abrams movies, but there was one moment in one of the movies, and that was really, really nice. And that was the moment that he was stood in front of the Vulcan Council, and they say, well, uh, because of your mistake, because he was half human, half Vulcan, we
Yes.
will
Yes.
still let you on to the Vulcan Academy, and he said, well, thanks, but no thanks, but I'm going to choose for Starfleet if you are still calling me and my mom a mistake.
Yes.
And that was so strongly, and that's what I always had in the back of my mind when Spock and Burnham talks, and now Spock is living still with that doubt of, okay, I'm half Vulcan, half human. How do I have to cope with all the feelings and that kind of? And so it was very also nice in Picard
Mm-hmm.
when Picard gave him that book of Spock to Elnor, because Elnor also
Mm-hmm.
had that to fight in him of, okay, what do I need to do?
Yes. The all natural against the duty.
Yeah. And well, there was another thing in this episode. We saw Pike wearing the green uniform jacket.
Mm-hmm.
And I must say, I never liked it. Although this variant is a little bit okayish. But what is your opinion about that?
I call this the Kermit uniform. Well, speaking about emotional Spock, we see that every time you force Spock you confront him about his emotions, you get a furious Spock, and you don't want to see a furious Spock in front of you. You saw Kirk do that in the time of those flowers with spore that made Spock in love, and Kirk used that same technique to put Spock out of control. And we see that in the 2009 movie happens 3 times: when he was a little boy, and when he was accepted in the Vulcan Science Academy, and he said no because someone pissed him off. And in the third time, when Kirk confronted him on the ship, because the future Spock advised him to do that. So it always worked. Do you remember that? Always worked.
Yeah.
You step on his emotions, it will hurt, and hurt a lot. So
well,
this
yeah.
happened. Is happened again in this episode, in the time where that he was in T'Pring's body, and that another other not logical Vulcan started to say many things very offensive to Spock, and he didn't know Spock was right there in front of him, and that was why he got that punch in the face.
Yeah. A little bit back to Amok time in TOS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We have seen Spock in very emotions, and you always say, okay, he will be angry or whatever. But there was one moment in Amok's time that when he returned to the ship and he thought he killed Kirk.
Yes. Yes.
You know where I'm going to.
Yes, I
he
know.
said, well, to McCoy, he said, well, I give up my position and give it to Scott, and Scott will be in command now, and I will go to the brig and I will face the consequences. But Kirk stood behind him and said, well, do you need to ask me that first, because I'm still alive? What the hell are you talking about? And Spock turned around said, and he was so happy.
Jim!
Yeah.
Yeah. You can, until the end of his life, Leonard Nimoy denied that was a smile. But that was a smile, everyone can see.
Yeah, I really love that scene. It's so in one way Spock, but it is also like you could see the friendship between those two.
Yes, you can see that, and you can see this kind of familiarity growing in the Enterprise, as we see in Strange New Worlds. You see people knowing each other, knowing details of those lives. You see people understanding better each one, knowing better. We now know the new Uhura. We
All
now
right.
know uh, the doctor, Mbenga. We now
Mhm.
know more Yuna, you know. So it's a normal path for any group when start to see the adventures of other group. Soon we will have a family in that starship,
Mhm.
and even that and old people go and new people came. That will be still a strong family.
Mhm. Mhm. So there was a moment in the beginning of the episode that T'Pring and um, Spock had this conversation that they have to make both efforts for the relationship to be successful.
Yes.
And Spock said, "Well, I still have a diplomatic mission, but I will be home for dinner."
Mm-hmm.
And with all the talking, he wasn't there. And when
Mm-hmm.
he came back, um, Walter Prong was pretty pissed off. And when she were gone, and he saw the dinner, and he could smack himself for the head with, "Oops, I did something wrong."
Yeah.
And but what do you think about the relationship he and the Pring has?
I think the Vulcans are so precise in those
Mm-hmm.
movements, in those phrases. But I remember a movie called Crew, very nice movie. When I heard this phrase, "Good warriors makes bad husbands." So if you
Yeah.
are good in your what you do, you are involved in your work, you will be pending to not act, not pending, not to exactly do by intentionally, but you'll be giving more attention to your job than to your
Mm-hmm.
family. It happens everywhere. It happened to me a long time, and can even happen to anyone who are in the same situation. The fact is, they have a shortcut to that, and Spock was very wise, given he heard Nurse Chapel's advice, and he had that shortcut, changing the Catras, that can explain it all emotionally, physically, um, everything. That would have wow. That if we humans could do that, it will solve many problems. I'm sure of that. But that was the solution he got, and they were so determined to understand one to another that it caused the body
Mm-hmm.
changing. So it forced them to understand even more about each other.
Yeah. I must say that body chasing was a little surprise for me because I hadn't expected that, and especially between Vulcans
Yeah,
we're talking
yep,
about. So in one way that was very funny, but in
yeah,
what you said, it's the perfect solution in that way, and especially that
yeah.
they had to perform the other's work, and so
Mm-hmm.
they could understand each other more.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think Vulcan minds are so practical, man. You can see Spock could store his mind in McCoy's brain. That was the first thing we learned about Catras. And then Enterprise teaches us that we can store a Catra in an idol, in a piece of rock. Those minds are so impressive. I even have a pen drive that can do that too. But Can you imagine that? Mind can be so easily manipulated, and they can have many kind of solutions about that.
Mm. This all happened. They spoke and the Pring were talking about the relationship, and then there was a alarm of
Mm,
they call Laan, and they say, well, there was an unauthorized um,
yes.
airlock.
Well, unauthorized spacewalk.
Yeah.
They were accessing the airlock without any reason. That could be not only a problem in airlock, someone could die there, or someone can be invading the ship. And that base was impressive. So you see, that base was the same Starbase 01 that the Klingons almost destroyed in Star Trek Discovery at the third season. So, but we have that base. They remounted that base, but now with domes, environmental domes. It was a very impressive upgrade. We love that. We can even fishing there. And now we see someone breaking the protocol while the ship is parked there. So that could be a big problem. That's why Una and Laan was so worried about that. And that's why those cadets were so screwed.
Well, that's what I was coming to is that um, before they had that conversation, well, why do all those juniors and seniors think that we don't have fun or can be fun?
Yes.
And Laan wanted to call for backup, but Una said,
Mhm.
well, you don't have to, I am your backup.
Yes.
And Laan said, well, people are so wrong, you are fun. So they went to that airlock together, and um, that's what I also talked with you about before we were recording. Uh, they were going to interrogate those two junior crew members, and they played good cop, bad cop. What was
Yeah.
very hilarious. And um, not only that, but they also uh, came into knowledge that there was an enterprise bingo, and
Mhm.
it's I really laughed about that whole scene because it was look like okay, it's could come straight out of a like a crime program or detective series, how they've been
Mhm.
interrogated, and but there was that just that funny in the background.
Yeah.
And
I was. Mm,
yeah, go
yes.
ahead.
I in my career I already played good cop and bad cop. Depending of the situation, it's very funny. You need to solve a problem, and we have many ways to interrogate someone. And I promise you, it is fun. So Laan wanted to be the bad cop, and this was her part of fun. And Una also wanted to because she's always serious about that. So they needed to play that way. But speaking about what happened, what motivated that, you know, you know that when we are in space, any little, little mistake can kill someone. You know,
Yeah.
so we can't play about that.
Hmm.
And despite it was fun, it was exactly what you should do to keep that ship the flagship of Starfleet. You know, it's
Hmm.
excellence of working. If it's fun, it's even better. But it is excellence of working.
Yeah. Well, there are other relationships that we see in this episode. For example, with
Mhm.
Nurse Chapel and Ortega.
Mm-hmm.
I must say also that is really funny. She is a very funny character. I really
Yeah.
like her. She's the typical badass lesbian, but so funny with all in what she does and what she says. And um, how do you see her in the other relations with the crew members?
The crew members, she is she's in her way very uh, extroversion. She always say what she thinks. She doesn't lie. She says it will hurt, so it will hurt. So uh, uh, the problem is what she doesn't say. Okay, and you saw her boyfriends she had not seriously. Uh, uh, I could call that friendship with benefits,
Yeah.
right? So at the end, she grew about that. She grew about that. She told him, "Man, you are you boring. You are boring." And he started to read poetry. That
Mm.
was not that bad, but it was not the ideal, you know. And she ended that because she felt it was becoming serious. So you see, you don't ask someone to come to your apartment if you are not trying to be serious. And he's starting to elaborate. I can transfer to enterprise, or you can transfer to where I am, etc., etc. You know where this kind of words go.
Mm.
So she was not even attempting to do that. She was only in the friendship with benefits, like as the time goes by. So she didn't want anything. She knew she didn't love him. That was important. That is what empathy also is. When you can feel what the other one is planning for your for future relationship, you can make a preemptive decision.
It was a little surprising that she would act like that because we know Chapel in the way of. So there was also a little moment what I really liked is when Chapel smacked Spock. After that, he was teasing her. And that is
Yes.
something we don't see often of Spock.
Well, Spock is always the professorial person. He's always ready to teach what he knows. He's always ready to show everyone that knowledge is power.
Hmm.
Not even Spock, but Leonard Nimoy was like that too.
Yeah.
So we can see it was very natural from him to do.
So what do you think about that Vulcan ritual what the Pring and Spock did?
The Vulcan ritual, they are always um, preparing their mind state. They use those rituals to canalize your their their will, control those minds to a level that humans will never see that easy. So they have rituals to everything. They have rituals. They have rituals to cross the fingers when they start in the bonfire. There's very very um, patient movements. There you feel there, and your terminal nervous terminals communicate something from your mind to the other mind, and everything. It's boring, but
Well,
but
that was what I uh, was confused about because normally you would see that by the Vulcans, but Spock and the Pring became very intimate.
Yes, that ritual was exactly about that. They became very intimate after that, after the very uncommon cure provided by our good doctor. And they, after that, they were back in their in Spock's quarters, and you could see very different from the beginning of the episode. They understood each other so very well, you know. If nothing of that happened before, and Spock says, T'Pring, I punched that guy you were treating. I will imagine she would be vulcanly furious. But no, she told him, well, since I know that guy, you were logical. So you see, that was the purpose of the whole episode, to people to help and help each other, help themselves to understand each other. So I hope this episode we are talking here about helps everyone to understand how we love Star Trek and what so many things we have here to understand and learn from that.
There is one little weird thing with the whole the Spock T'Pring thing going on in this episode is that when they were swapped in the bodies, they
Hmm.
needed to have the help of Memanga and Nurse Chapel to switch them over. And
Yeah.
I was thinking, why not with a other Vulcan ritual?
Well, you see in the beginning of the episode, T'Pring says Spock, we are trying this for hours. Logically, they have tried that same ritual and other variants from that, but they couldn't have any success. So it became a medical problem, and it was the good thing is the Dr. Mbenga knows very nicely the psyche and physiology of the Vulcan brain. So that's why he came with that solution. You need to if I understood correctly, you need to make the other person inside this body not comfortable, so they can be back.
Hmm.
And he laid all both in a very short distance between those beds and energized those crystals so they could shock the brains, and the brain says, well, something is not right here, and let's recover for this shock and put everything in order. That's why your Dr. Mbenga treatment worked.
Hmm. Well, there was a other funny thing when they had swapped bodies, and Pike came to Spock's
Yeah,
room
that
and
was.
said, "Well, diplomatic problem. You need to come, and he only wants to
Yeah.
talk to you." And but T'Pring was in his body, and it was really funny to see how they interact. And but it was a very good acting from the actors as well, because they had to
Yeah.
act as somebody counterpart. And
Spock needed to act like T'Pring, acting like Spock.
yeah, and that was very funny. And I remember that when the uh, Nogovians went
Mhm.
talking to Spock, you could see also that uh, she was talking very Vulcan, and Admiral April and Pike were listening and observing, and
Mhm.
Pike came between them,
Yeah.
and they didn't like that, but they were listening, and they were listening what Pike was saying. He was just as a commanding officer, he was defending Spock.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things that they say, okay, we will talk, we will listen, and at the end of the episode, they would carry the Federation flag.
Yes.
What do you think about that solar sail ship?
Well, I think they were impossible because they are relying in their own light to have propulsion. They have flashlights on the structure that was inflating the sails. I really don't know how that thing can fly faster than light. And I love it the way everyone treated them because they are at all intelligent people. They can move through stars. They have many, even traditional starships. They have modern starships. They only broke that ship there because it is a ceremonial ship. Despite it's very elegant to see, I don't believe that ship works. It's very, very beautiful.
Yeah.
And I rely in the fact those are intelligent people. They were there especially to watch, to understand what is the Federation in these very, very deep dogmas and traditions, and how our people, the people of Federation, understands each other. And they did a very nice job about that.
Yeah. I think it's also very nice to see how Pike understood the Regonians. And he played in them so they would be joining the Federation. And
I believe Cherry Pike's opinion was the cherry over the cake for the Regonians.
But what do you think about the speeches they write for him?
The pep talks. I'm sorry?
The pep talks and the speeches he's giving to people. Like,
well,
yeah.
Like what?
For example, I think there was episode 2 or 3 that he beamed down to that planet, and they didn't know when they were helping Una from that planet, and she so he came down and said, well, sorry to interrupt, but this and this and this this happened to Earth, and that will be you too. And he had a great speech to to tell what's going on, or like a pep talk.
Yeah, Pike is not the phaser captain.
No.
Pike is the captain. He is not the reaction to the enemy. He is the reaction that keep that crew together, feeling they are one. They are there for a purpose. So that's what real leaders do. Of course, we don't have those scenes filmed by Kirk, but he absolutely also had those moments with his crew, his motivational moments. You see more from Pike. I believe it's more convenient for the problems they are facing now.
So what do you think about the Admiral April's task or role in this episode?
Admiral April's is incidental. If it was not him, would be another one. But April have his love to the Enterprise. He was captain for the Enterprise before Pike, and he has a very nice friendship and personal admiration for Pike because of things Pikes have been doing. We saw that in Discovery. We saw that in the secret problems of Talos 4. And Pikes keeps making scores. Each mission, each problem, he does right. He does good every time he goes. That's why Admiral is so connected to the Enterprise and to Pike himself. You remember that he went to the Earth to take Pike back to the Enterprise because the problem was hard and Una needed him. But and Pike didn't came only as a military to him. He came almost like a father.
There was another last scene, and that is when Una and La'an went up on the Enterprise itself, and they had a force field on them, and that's why they think about, okay, they do this all because they want to break the rules, but they are making the rules. So they went to that one section of the hull that was the oldest part of the Enterprise, and there are crew members who have signed that hull plate.
Yes, that's the last square of the Enterprise bingo. If you had patience to read everything, I was able to read and translate that to Brazilian Portuguese too, and it's impressive. The sign, the scorch, is the very last of them. But you can't, if you are the first officer and you want to go in a spacewalk, and you need to go to a spacewalk, you are not breaking any rule because you makes the rule. So they broke the rule that is the very own Enterprise bingo.
Yeah,
and that's where the fun is. If you can break, many people say rules are made to be broken. Signed by Bart Simpson, So you see, so you make rules about break rules. Whoever breaks those rules too is having fun.
Yeah.
And that's the secret. I will never ever endorse break the rules. I love the rules. They are made for a reason. And we as leaders of groups that proceed trying to have some progress in our work, we respect those rules, and we have many problems if someone is not respecting them. But we are talking about the Enterprise bingo here.
Yeah.
And people do that to have fun while work. The best thing you can do to be a good person and a good professional is to have fun in your work.
Yeah.
So that's why the Enterprise bingo were not forbidden. That will create another one just after that.
So we are at the end of this episode. Is there something you'd like to add?
Well, I think we talked about everything, and no, I think we covered all the story.
Okay, well, we just have one more thing to do, and that is rating this episode. 1 being bad and 10 being very good. So, how do you want to rate this episode?
I would rate this episode as 8, not 10, because it was not super Star Trek like I love to be. Breaking the rules is not a good thing to cultivate in Starfleet. So I don't think it's a good thing. And it was not a 10 because of the comic thing and for the change bodies thing that it's not a new thing to see. We saw this as I told you in many movies. So 8.
Yeah. Well, I'm agreeing to that. I was also going to rate this one as an 8. So, yeah. Thank you for joining me again. It was nice talking to you again.
Always happy to do that.
And, guys, we still have 5 episodes to go. And then the first season, we have gone with the first season. So, enjoy it. I hope you enjoy this episode of us. And I will talk to you soon.
I hope to. Looking forward to that. Live long and prosper for everyone hearing us.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening and join me next week for a new extra episode of Arena Talks in the Star Trek series. You can listen and subscribe to Arena Talks on the YouTube channel or join the Facebook group. If you'd like to comment or talk with me about this episode, you can reach out on the Facebook group or the YouTube channel. I also like to tell you about my other podcast called Girls Talking Trek. Together with my co-host Amanda, we recap every 2 weeks a Star Trek episode starting with Star Trek TNG. All the episodes will be recapped in chronologically following. We will approach each episode with humor and a feminine look. Girls Talking Trek is to listen, follow and subscribe on Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, the Facebook group and the YouTube channel. See you next week.